Hi everybody, this is Dan Stobarger. Welcome to this week's KFIR Middle East Update. Let me warn you, this one will probably be a little bit longer than 10 minutes. There's just so much that's gone on, and I just feel like I need to give you as much information as I can. I sort of held off to the very end of the week because from day to day you just didn't know what would happen next. Know what I mean? Let me apologize to begin with, to say it's winter, we're being snowed in, I got a cold and a cough, and so it's probably going to interrupt a smooth presentation, but I cannot not give this update. So let me begin with something that I came across from a book that a friend suggested that I read, having to do with, let's see, the name of it is The New Testament and Its World by N.T. Wright. And one of the quotes that I pulled out I thought was really appropriate for the times that we're living in. Let me give it to you. It's under my musing section. And by the way, make sure you go to our website, holygroundexplorations.com, to access this PowerPoint, or just click on the link of the YouTube, because I give you that PowerPoint link there as well. Here's the quote. "We have no reasons to think that Middle Eastern politics were any less complicated in the first century than the century we are now in. On the contrary, there's every reason to suppose that there were just as many tensions, problems, puzzles, you name it, just as many then as now. Just as much reason for some to throw up their hands in despair, for others to grit their teeth and forge ahead, and for others again to try to forget the whole situation in the struggle just simply to survive. Back then and right now, this is all true." So we have had one heck of a week. I'll give you my news bites and just plow on through. As you know by now, the United States is responsible for assassinating and taking out a high-level threat, Soleimani, and Iran has retaliated back. We'll get into all that, but and so the war drums are beating, the sabers are rattling. Questions who's going to blink. Trump just recently tweeted that his administration already has targeted 52 Iranian sites. This is getting a lot of blowback or whatever, but he's warning the Iranians, you mess with us, you're going to regret it. Now, as I mentioned, Iran's made good on its threat for the killing of Qasem Soleimani by firing more than a dozen missiles. We'll talk about this more in depth later, at a U.S. base in Iraq. Apparently, no damage whatsoever to life. And Trump tweeted at that time, all is well. It seems now, where we're at today on Friday, that both Trump as well as Iran is stepping back from the brink. It appears that Iran is standing down. Now, the U.S. president says that he is going to impose immediate economic sanctions against the Islamic Republic. And he vows that they'll never have a nuclear weapon. And then he's going to claim that those rockets that were sent, I think there's 15 of them, were paid for by the Obama administration. You can imagine how that's going over in Congress. Now, Soleimani's replacement has made the statement that Muslims will leave no spot safe for Americans. Now, a couple other things before we jump into more of the Iranian situation. I thought it interesting, sad, but interesting, that CNN Anderson Cooper compares Soleimani to who? What would you think? Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin or, a chief terrorist whatsoever. No, he compares Soleimani to World War II hero Charles de Gaulle. This is just spinning completely out of control. And then kind of shifting just for a second, because this is just news bites, the upcoming elections in Israel. We've got the religious right trying to coalesce more together in order to kind of push Bibi over the top as far as getting a majority. But this is not going to help. Chief Rabbi Yishak Yosefi makes the comments about immigrants from Russia, and he basically classifies them as religion-hating Gentiles. Now, I just share that with you because when we go to Israel and we do work projects, one of the projects that we work with is down in Ashdod. We work with a congregation called Voice of Judah, and it's comprised primarily of Russian immigrants. And these folks have kind hearts. They've given their life to the Lord. And so, I can sense the tension that's building with the upcoming elections. Well, now let's jump in. And again, I'm going to run out of time. I'm not going to be able to give you everything. So this time, make sure you do get the PDF PowerPoint. I thought this article was fascinating about Soleimani and comparing him to Haman. As we mentioned, or maybe we haven't gone into the detail yet, 10 people were killed in the blast, and Soleimani was ripped to pieces, leaving little behind to ascertain that the intended target was actually killed. With only scraps of bodies to work with, Soleimani's death was confirmed by the remains of his arm, still wearing a large red ring that he never removed. Take a look at that picture. Now, a Hebrew language website reported on this, and they said from a Jewish mystical perspective, they noted the significance of the ring that was presented to prominent biblical figure in the past, Haman. And you can read about that in Esther 3:10, that the king gives Haman the signet ring. And Haman was, like Soleimani, an evil underling in the Persian Empire, and they both were dedicated to killing Jews. Like Haman's evil actions resulted in the death of his 10 sons, no coincidence that 10 people were killed in the drone strike that took out Soleimani. I find that too coincidental to be a coincidence, if you know what I mean. Now, with all that's going on, the threats continue. I thought I'd just give you a list of the Iranian threats. A day after the U.S. eliminated the top general, a targeted airstrike, a series of rockets were launched into the Green Zone, which houses the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. Now, here's about 5 or 6 other threats. The head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, he says the U.S. military will leave Iraq humiliated, and it will take Israel with it. Iran threatens to attack the White House as their parliament chants death to America. Iran has offered an $80 million reward to kill Trump. Iran threatens to attack Tel Aviv in revenge strikes. Soleimani's assassination prompts Iran to abandon the so-called nuclear deal. Iranian hardliners, quote, major Israeli cities could be among the retaliation targets. And finally, Trump is threatening disproportionate response to any Iranian attack on the U.S. And so you can understand why I tried to hold off to the very end in all of this. You can read the article on the strikes itself. And then there's an article here on Russia's response, key player in the Middle East now, especially as we take a look at Ezekiel, I told you it was coming, 38 and 39, the Magog invasion, Russia wants to be the key player in the Middle East. And so listen to these comments of their response. They condemn it. They condemn this as an adventuristic act. This is from the Foreign Ministry statement. Quote, the move by Washington is fraught with grave consequences for regional peace and stability. We regard such actions as detrimental to finding solutions to complex problems that are in the Middle East. And rather than contributing to the escalation of violence. That's what these acts are doing. And later he makes the comment that Soleimani was devoted. He was devotedly serving the national interest of Iran. So they're making him that martyr hero. Again, coming from Russia. And again, Russia wants to be the peacekeepers of the Middle East. You probably heard by now that there was a jetliner down, 176 people that were on board. The U.S. officials, this is out of Iran, U.S. officials are saying that it's highly likely that the Iranian anti-aircraft missiles that were launched into Iraq at the U.S. troops, that there was a mistake that was made and they shot down their own plane. 176 casualties. They refused to give up the black box. We're just going to have to wait and see what transpires in all of this. There's an article here about the Hezbollah in the United States. There's never been a greater threat of terror attacks on U.S. soil than there is right now. And Hezbollah, we know, has cells in South America, and the most porous borders that we have into the U.S., of course, is the Mexican borders. And so high alert regarding Hezbollah on our own soil. You can read more about that. As I can see right now, I'm already out of time. We haven't really dealt with the New York City anti-Semitism article here. Basically, New York City has seen an increase of 26% in anti-Semitic incidents in 2019. This according to the latest annual crime statistics that just were released by the NYPD on Monday. Natural gas, this is a big deal. The article basically says, during the last week, earth-shattering events occurred that completely disrupted the Middle East. Right? Caused intense anger in certain Arab and Muslim capitals and threatened war in the region. And then it says, and in other news, the Americans assassinated Iranian General Soleimani. Basically, what they're stating is that this natural gas field, that the Leviathan that Israel is now making available, is going to be competition to both Russia and Turkey and their pipelines or whatever. Israel has become a power player now when it comes to natural resources, natural gas. So take a look at that article. Sad article on France and becoming an Islamic republic. I'll end with this, try to keep it under 15 minutes. My 7 Trump takeaways. This is actually from Joe Rosenberg's Twitter feed. And he says, number 1, Trump has said that no American or Iraqi lives were lost. Now, I know CNN and others have reported that 80 casualties and that the U.S. is hiding the bodies and sending them to Tel Aviv. This is just nonsense. Trump says there were no American or Iraqi lives that were lost. Number 2, Iran fired 15 missiles, not 22, at the bases that housed the U.S. forces, and 4 of those missiles failed to detonate. That's nearly a third of the rockets that were launched. As we mentioned, after the counterattack, very quickly, Iran appears to be standing down. The U.S. now is imposing more economic sanctions. Trump did not signal that the U.S. would launch an immediate military retaliation. However, he did say that all options are open and available to him, and this clearly gives him the right to reserve the right to use force if additional events are warranted. Trump, as we've mentioned earlier, made the statement that these missiles were built by the billions of dollars that came from the Obama administration that they gave Tehran. And finally, Trump goes on to criticize past U.S. administrations, Europe, the world powers, for not being tough enough against Iranian aggression. And he's made it clear that this is now the time for change. So as I mentioned, I held off as long as I could. Who knows, once I hit the end button here or whatever, who knows what's going to take place over the weekend. But we do our best here at Holy Ground KFIR to give you as much information as we can. KFIR Middle East Update. So I hope you can gather your friends around, show this to them in your home groups or whatever. Get people signed up to join us in our global community as we seek to study the Bible, understand the times that we're living in, and keeping our eyes on Israel. With that, shalom. God's best to you all.